June 1st, 1866. A small party of armed men crossed the Niagara River near Buffalo. They are part of a bigger group that's been assembling for quite a few days. They quickly rout 5 troops who have attempted to make a stand against them right outside of the town. With the coast now clear, the main force began crossing the Niagara River to meet them. These men are the Fenians, an Irish nationalist group with cells all over the world. They plan to capture Canada and hold the territory hostage until Great Britain let the Irish have an independent nation. The plan included several attacks all across the province, but only one would become a serious threat. Eckley's Hill, Campbello Island, Pembina, and Pigeon Hill were all minor raids and skirmishes during the Fenian Wars that ended in defeat. But unlike those other failed raids, this time there was no huge Canadian or British army waiting for them. This time, they had the element of surprise. But even this only lasted long enough for them to land and eat, as British regulars and Canadian militia were soon alerted and began marching to Fort Erie the next morning. On the morning of June 2nd, Fenian General John O'Neill ordered his troops, many of who Civil War veterans used to the task, to dig in along Frenchman's Creek. O'Neill was expecting a column of British regulars under Colonel George Peacock to attack from the north, though he would soon learn that that attack was not going to come. Peacock had instead planned to link up with Colonel Alfred Booker's militia, numbering at about 850 men, who were waiting further south at the town of Port Colborne. O'Neill, who had most likely gotten wind of this through local spies and sympathizers, moved his main army west to cut off Booker's men while leaving a small detachment at Black Creek to keep an eye on Peacock. Booker's men embarked on a train to Ridgeway at 7:30 in the morning, while Peacock began advancing, forcing the Fenian detachment to rejoin O'Neill. Once at Ridgeway, Booker moved up Ridge Road, not knowing that the entire Fenian force lay ahead. Booker's force consisted of several companies from the Caledonia, Trinity, and Queen's Own Rifles, as well as companies of the 13th Battalion. The battle began as Canadian men ran into Fenian skirmishers along the sides of the road and quickly forced them back to the fence lines and ditches up road. More fighting broke out on the ridge east of the road, where Fenians also had to withdraw. As fighting in the center became more fierce, Booker dismounted from his horse to avoid being shot, which may have also affected his ability to see the battlefield. At this point, the Fenian skirmishers, outnumbered and knowing better defenses were behind them, withdrew across the fields and apple orchard to the farmhouse along Birdie Road. The Canadian militia advanced through the orchard and came under heavy fire from the experienced Fenians. Private McIntosh, a Canadian fighting in the orchard, remarked, "It was easy to see that most of them were old soldiers of the American Army by their perfect formation and the position they had taken up." The Queen's Own Rifles especially took heavy casualties here, but once again, the outnumbered Fenians withdrew. Now the Canadians, thinking they had the Fenians on the run, pursued them, only to walk right into O'Neill's main line, which had been waiting for them just past Birdie Road. A confused Canadian company on the ridge advanced towards the Fenian lines alone, only to be beaten back by a hail of their musket balls. Another company would advance and stand on the opposite flank while both main lines exchanged fire. Although the situation was not ideal, the battle was still winnable for the Canadian Army at this point, though that was about to change. Suddenly, cries about cavalry being spotted further up the road were heard by Booker, who was not the most competent commander. He ordered his men to fall back and form square, without any more proof than one or two scared militiamen. What they probably saw was John O'Neill and other Fenian officers overlooking the battlefield, but Booker reacted too promptly, and the damage was done. It was now the Fenians' turn to chase the Canadian militia as they advanced to Bertie Road and opened fire. The confused and disorganized Canadians attempted to return fire, but it was ineffective, and men began to rout. Booker desperately attempted to reorganize his men, but it was to no avail, and the stage was set for a disaster. Seeing this, the Fenians took advantage and launched a charge against the remaining Canadian militiamen. There was very little melee, as the Canadian militia routed before or as soon as the Fenian line made contact with them. By now, the battle was lost, but Booker still uselessly tried to re-rally his men, though eventually he gave up. The retreat happened so fast that all of the dead and wounded were left on the field where they lay. Booker's men retreated back to Port Colborne, while O'Neill, faced with thousands of fresh regiments coming from Toronto, decided to withdraw to Buffalo. Upon arriving at Fort Erie, O'Neill spotted a group of 79 men terrified by their captain's decision to make a stand. The Fenians then moved into positions to surround the garrison and attacked. The British men then fired one volley before attempting a retreat and being cut off by the Fenians. The scared, surrounded, and outnumbered men decided to surrender. The men were taken prisoner, but were released a few hours later when the Fenians withdrew across the Niagara River. During the crossing, O'Neill and his men were detained by U.S. authorities, but were released soon after under the condition they dropped their weapons. At the Battle of Ridgeway, the Canadians had 31 killed and 37 wounded. Many of those killed died of infections and diseases later on from their wounds. The Fenians, on the other hand, had only 2 killed and 8 wounded, suffering surprisingly low casualties compared to the Canadians. At Fort Erie, the Canadians and British suffered 3 killed and 16 wounded, with the rest captured, while the Fenians lost even more than at Ridgeway, with 9 killed and 14 wounded. The Battle of Ridgeway was the first battle fought only by Canadians, and fears of more attacks like this would lead to Confederation in Canada just a year later. And so, the battle is over. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoy more videos like this, keep an eye out for my upcoming series on the Canadian rebellions of 1837.
The colours they are flying, boys to fight, kill or wound, may we still be found, content with our heart, fair me boys, on the cold, cold ground.